Welcome back to another episode of Better Than I Found It, the podcast all things college golf. You're listening to Mike McGraw, the men's golf coach at Baylor University. Today's guest is former Kent State golf coach Herb Page. Herb's story is not only one of long-term success, he coached for 41 years, but it is also a bit unique. He was an 8-time varsity letter winner while playing golf, hockey, and football. Yes, I said football at Kent State University. Herb is a member of 6 Halls of Fame, and although retired from coaching ranks, he is still very involved in the game of golf. I know you'll enjoy this podcast. All right, Better Than I Found It listeners, please welcome one of the all-time college golf coaching legends, former Kent State coach, Herb Page, to the podcast today. Herb, thanks so much for taking time to join me.
It's my pleasure, Mike. Great to be with you.
It's great. You know, I've had a lot of Hall of Fame coaches on this podcast because I think they have so much to teach us, and they're little, nuggets of wisdom that might come eking out of you. I'm hoping that happens today. But, and some of them retired like you are. So, first of all, I just want to catch people up kind of on the goings on of Herb Page since you retired in July of 2019. I mean, I know you have a place in Kiowa Island, and I know you probably still play some golf. Paula probably has a bunch of honeydews for you. So fill us in. What's going on with Herb Page?
Mike, I'm really blessed. When I retired, we've been coming to Kiowa Island for 20 years, for 2 weeks at a time, and it's our favorite place. I still have Windmill Lakes Golf Club. I have another golf facility. So I retired from coaching, which got me relieved of, let's say, 75 to 90 days a year in a hotel room and the travel. So I still operate my golf courses. I have wonderful staff. That's why, as we speak, I'm sitting on the 15th hole at Turtle Point overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. And I stay down here for about 3.5 months. And I go back home to Ohio, and then I'm still actively working and I'm staying active with Kent State. I stay away from John Mills and coaching. He can give advice. I can give him advice if he asks. I see the players because they play my golf course. And, I'm very, very blessed. I've got a great life right now.
Wow, that's incredible. I didn't ever think you were truly going to retire. I mean, come on, that's not going to happen. So it's a good thing you just took and you've kind of your job description's changed a little bit. You don't recruit, you don't travel with the team, you don't coach a golf team on a daily basis, but you're obviously still very busy and involved with golf. So that's great. 41 years as a coach at Kent State. So I'm going to give a little synopsis, and I knew it was an incredible career, honestly, as I was coaching for all those years that we knew each other. But when you see it in one little snapshot here, it's pretty amazing. So 22 MAC titles, and you aren't sure, it may be 23, but anyways, it's over 20 MAC titles. 20 on the women's side when you were director of golf for both teams. So you obviously oversaw the women's program. 23 times you were the MAC Coach of the Year. 4 times your team finished in the top 10 at the national championship. You won 3 regional titles in 03, 01, and 2010. You had 28 golf All-Americans. You coached 1 major champion, future major champion. I believe you've been inducted into 6 Halls of Fame. I mean, there ought to be a Hall of Fame for a guy who's been in 6 Halls of Fame. 28 times your team made it to the regional, and knowing that for the first 15 or 10 years of your career, they didn't have a regional, so it probably would have been 38. But 18 times your team advanced to the NCAA championship. I mean, Herb, that's quite a resume, and I know I've missed something, but that's incredible. I mean, is that humbling to hear it that way?
Mike, when I was doing it, you were always looking to the next week. You were preparing your team for the next tournament. You never looked back. And even when I left, I just felt like, I love the title of your book, and I've read it cover to cover, and it's perfect, better than I found it. I left Kent State better than I found it. But each year I thought we got better and better. So not until I was out for about a year and a half, it hit me. And, sometimes you go to an event and you get honored or something happens and you realize, my goodness, yeah, that was pretty good. So at the time, Mike, it never dawned on me what we were doing. I was trying to win a national championship. I was trying to put my guys in a position where they could win the national championship. And that's so hard.
Mm.
And when I look back, I go, my goodness, I had some really great players. And yes, we did. So it's after I retired that it's kind of like, thank you for reading that. And it's yes, very, very proud of what we did. Very proud of the players.
Yeah, you need to be. That's an amazing run that you had. And I've coached 36 seasons. Let's see, 9 of them as a high school coach. So I don't think I'm ever going to get to 41 at the collegiate level. But the uh, the unique start you had is what's so interesting to me. You got to Kent State in 1970. You're, I think, one of the only 8-time varsity letter winners in Kent State history. You won 4 golf letters in golf, 2 in hockey, and 2 in football. So we can talk about the golf, and you're a golf guy, and hockey because you're from up north in Canada. But football, how in the world did you become a football player at Kent State? I need to hear that story.
Well, the short of it is I was a walk on, and I won a lot of bets, by the way. Yeah, I played football for Kent State. What position did I play? People look at me and they go DB, running back, quarterback. I mean, you name. Well, I was a walk on, truly a walk on, sidewinder, place kicker. That's what happened. And we were playing golf. Quick story: we were playing golf one day. Golf course is a mile from the campus, right on the edge, and there was a track and field. It was a dual meet. And we all finished playing, and we said, hey, let's go over and watch the track and field meet. This guy called Gerald Tinker is running the 100 back then yard dash. And Gerald Tinker won the Olympic gold medal in Munich, Germany in 72. And there he is. He's the fastest human in the world. Let's go watch this guy. You're an athlete. So we go over and watch, and he wins the 100-yard dash by like 10 yards. It's unbelievable. And then there was the football team in spring practice, with 3 fields playing away. And I walked over with my buddies, and there was a guy place kicking. True story. And I don't know, golfers being cocky, and we just finished wagering playing golf. And I said something, well, I can do this or I can do that. I can kick an extra point, blah, blah, blah. So I walked on the field, and they were down in the other fields. And I don't know, I kicked a 35-yard field goal, sidewinder. Hadn't kicked a football since high school. And everybody's clamoring away, and I won $1. And, that's walked off field, went home. Well, I got a call like 2 weeks later. The trainer saw it. The assistant coaches played golf at the golf course. I knew them all as assistant football coaches. And next thing you know, they gave me a bag of footballs, and I started kicking footballs. And I got in a game junior year, won a game and lost the Tangerine Bowl game with some missed kicks. But I sat in the locker room for 2 years with the greatest coach of all time, Don James, who left Kent State to go to Washington. And I sat in that locker room with Jack Lambert, Nick Saban, Abdul Salam, Larry Falk. 10 guys went on to play in the NFL. You don't know it at the time, what's going on. You're just part of a team. And that taught me a lot about teamwork. And like I said, I sat in the back of the locker room and listened to what I consider the greatest coach I've ever played for in my career. So, hey, I got drafted, Mike. I got drafted in the 5th round by the British Columbia Lions to play professional football. And that's the end of it. Let's move on to golf.
Okay, let's move on to golf. But wow, that's a great story. And not many people know that you were in the locker room at the same time Nick Saban was. That's pretty special. Obviously, he's gone on to do some amazing things. And Don James was a great coach, obviously. Okay, so you become the golf coach a couple of years after you got your master's at Kent State in 1978. You coached 41 straight years.
Yes, I did. And when I was getting my master's, I was the GA. So I actually had 2 years as a grad assistant, but 41 straight years. Yes.
Yeah, that's just an amazing run. Your success in the Mid-American Conference, the MAC conference, was notable, obviously, because you won 22 titles. I'm not sure you like the word dominating, but you were one of the obviously dominant coaches in that conference. But to me, and I'm not using this as an excuse, but for a northern, so you've got the climate issue, mid-major, so you've got the size of, and whatever, to be competitive on a national level, that's just awe-inspiring to me, to be able to do it up there. That there's been some great mid-majors in the South that have done pretty well in the national championship. Not very many, if any, up north. Now, before you explain to all of us how you were able to do that, I'm going to come up with a story you may or may not remember. 2013, you had a great team. I know Corey Connors was on that team and maybe Mackenzie Hughes. I'm not sure who was on there, but you had a great team. We were at the Aggie Invitational. So this is like the first week, last week in March, somewhere in there. And I had a pretty good team. I think we ended up the season ranked 12th. So we weren't great for Oklahoma State standards, but we were good. And we finished about third or fourth. And I went over to congratulate you because your team had finished second behind Alabama, who would go on to win the national championship a month and a half later. And I said, Herb, great job. And he goes, yeah, you said, I'm pretty happy with this. We haven't been outdoors in Kent, Ohio, but 2 days since Thanksgiving. So you literally in Kent, Ohio, the weather had been such that year that you couldn't even go outside. And I went straight to my team on the van with that story. It's like, you guys want to explain away and make an excuse as to why you didn't play well this week. They were outdoors 2 times since they ate turkey on Thanksgiving. Is that a true story or not?
Mike, that's a true story. Sometimes we have some brutal winters, and sometimes we lay the clubs down for a couple months, and we live with that. But yeah, that was pretty special. And I know the last day, paired with Alabama, we knew they're pretty good. But you got to remember, in 2012, we finished. When you lose your first match, you get placed fifth. The teams lose it. So we'd finished fifth. We were in the match play, and of course, the team that beat us was Alabama in 2012. So that was a great team. And you're right. It was Corey Connors, Mackenzie had graduated, Taylor Pendrith. It was a great team, and we had a great indoor facility. They're used to doing that, and of course, this might have been our third tournament, maybe our fourth. So we'd been down south, played, come home. But the frustrating thing when you come back home, sometimes you want to get out and play, and we just got another inch of snow, or it was too cold. But that team just was. They were just mentally prepared. They knew. They didn't use any of that as excuses. Hey, this is a great tournament. We get to play against Oklahoma State. We go down there, man. We got to prove that we are a national contender. And I'm going to backtrack, Mike. I hope you don't mind me doing this.
Please.
I'm going to backtrack because you called us a mid-major. And that's the chip on my shoulder, Mike.
Good going.
We're not a mid-major. We are a mid-major in basketball. That's how they frame that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not a northern school. We're a Midwestern school. So, the northern schools are way up there in Michigan and North Dakota and South. We're just a Midwestern school. So you're getting a little insight to maybe some of my recruiting. But and in football, there's a SWC or an ESA. That's the same with football. We don't belong in that football Power Five. And maybe basketball, we are a mid-major. We are not a mid-major in golf. I want you to know that, Mike McGraw. We're a major. Thank you. So anyways, that was a great event at Texas A&M, and disappointing at the end of the year, of all things. We're ranked, I think, top 10 or 15 in the country, and we had a bad week at the regionals and didn't make it to the finals. That's golf, isn't it? Crazy.
That is golf. I've seen that happen before. It's no fun. But thank you for bringing up that point about mid-major, because the term is used so often. And yes, it was meant for football and basketball because of those two sports being what they are. But there are still some challenges for Kent State.
Sure.
Yeah, there's still challenges. And I love the fact you don't use it as an excuse, that you actually put that chip on your shoulder. And I'll never forget, Bruce Hepler told me that one time. He said he was talking to a coach of a young coach at a school that's not one of the Power Five conferences. And he was saying, listen, you can moan and whine about all these challenges, or you can do something about it. And guys have done something about it at smaller schools. And, another point that's very well taken, in 1977, Mike Holder had one of the best teams. He had the best team in the country pretty much. And it snowed on January 11th. And we were not outdoors in Oklahoma. I was a high school junior. We were not outdoors in Oklahoma for over 38 days. So they went to their first tournament in February, having not hit one shot outdoors, not one. And they won by 38 shots in Arizona. So I agree with you. It's like, first of all, we're not a mid-major, but we're not going to allow a climate to dictate how we're going to play and compete. And the fact that you guys ran over us at the Aggie Invitational, I'll never forget that. And I use it as motivation for my guys. It's like, you know, talk about all the excuses you want. Kent State should have had a bucket load of excuses, and they didn't take any. They almost beat the national championship. So there you go.
No, I appreciate that, Mike. That's a good memory. That's a great memory. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Well, okay. So one of the ways you kind of mitigate any challenges you have has to start with recruiting. And I think you were one of the greats, and most people aren't going to know that. We got to have players. If you don't have players, you're not beating anybody. So you did what I would consider a masterful job. How did you get so many players to come to Kent, Ohio? And I know you recruited in Canada, your home country, your country where you were born. But how did you get kids to come there? What was your philosophy? Why were you a great recruiter?
Mike, I think if it's like baseball, if you bat 350, you're in the Hall of Fame. And maybe recruiting is a little bit of that. If you're successful in 1 out of 3, then you're a good recruiter. But I think it was in stages with me back when I started coaching, and all through the 80s into about 91 or 2. I only had 2 scholarships, and it was very difficult. I mean, I didn't even have the financial aid to go out and recruit kids, and we would get the leftovers that Ohio State didn't want, and whatever. And then I branched off. I knew that I could go into Canada and give partials. And then the second stage of recruiting came in early 90s when they took the cap off at Kent State, and I got fully funded. And that started, I'm very proud of this. It started about a 25 to 30 year run where, hey, there was no excuses. We had the money excuse. We had the what? There are no excuses. And then the third stage of my recruiting, so, from 1990 on, I could then go head to head with Oklahoma State, with Ohio State, with Auburn, with North, and give those young men the same offer financially. And then in '04, it just validated what we did when this young man, Ben Curtis, won the Open. And then we were probably one of the first 6 or 7 to build a state-of-the-art indoor facility. Opened in, I think, '06 or '07. So that was the other stage. So when you brought people in, you had more to show. Mike, I stressed, and I still stressed at the end, you come to Kent State University to get a degree. I really believe in that. My wife is a college professor. My father was a factory worker, and he wanted an education for his son, and I got one from Kent State. So it was, education. Listen, we were lifting weights in the early '80s when nobody did it. and we got criticized. I can remember a certain coach in the state of Florida. Yeah, you go there and you lift weights. Well, guess what? I maybe we were like ahead of our time, but yeah, we lifted weights and we hit balls into a net. And so we did things and the idea that you can't stay competitive for 12 months of the year. So this is my recruiting. You got to lay the clubs down and get refreshed mentally. This was my recruiting spiel, hey, you think those schools down in Texas and Florida are playing golf in December and January? Hell no, they're not playing as much as you think. So I mean, I wasn't negative recruiting. I was just saying, this is the reality. And I think what I did back then, we just mapped it out, very organized, that this is when we start our season, and this is how we do it. And you play spring for Kent State. We'll map your summer schedule out, playing the national schedule. You come back and play in the fall. We can put you in a competitive environment 9 or 10 months of the year, as good as anybody. And what were people doing in December and January anyways back then? They might have been playing a little bit. Back then there was some tournaments in Florida. So access to a facility, which was my own golf course, Windmill Lakes, I stress that. You could walk on Saturday, Sunday. We played qualifiers Saturday and Sunday morning at 7:00 in the morning. And you find out that all these fancy schools couldn't play golf courses on the weekends. So we stressed that. And then I'll be honest, I never recruited south of the Mason-Dixon line. Even when we got successful, and we did, I would get lots of letters. And I thought to myself, I had this letter from a pretty good kid in Texas. And I'm thinking, if he isn't going to Baylor, and he isn't going to Texas, and he isn't going to Texas A&M and Texas Tech, I went just down the line then, why would I want him at Kent State? So, I had my regional recruiting area, and then obviously, I could convince any Canadian that they were coming south to play golf at Kent State.
Well,
Now
you
that's
didn't have to
I
convince them;
suppose,
they were coming south. They
but they
were
were
coming
coming
south.
south. So, and I don't know. And then I think the other thing is we developed players. We could teach them and we could coach them, and the track record was pretty good. We developed them, and they stayed with us, and we could develop them and get them an education and put them on the track, maybe to go into professional golf. It's so hard, we know that, or certainly get them into golf business, which a lot of them wanted to do, or get them into the business world. So it was like a weekly, monthly, year-long plan that we put into place for these kids. And I listen. We the best thing in early that mid part of recruiting was when kids never made a decision until the last week of
Hmm.
signing. Remember those days, Mike?
I do. I do.
And you and Mr. Holder and you mentioned Bruce. You would zero in on the same guys and be fighting over those 7 or 8 guys, and they wouldn't make a decision for about a week or two to go. And Herb Page would just kind of go in and not get involved in those battles, knowing he couldn't win them. And there was so many great players. Now, the worst thing that happened to me is when you guys got smart then and you decided, let's get early commitments. And damn, that hurt me. So I had to come up with a new type of recruiting philosophy that, you had to really get deep. And I don't mean I didn't listen, I got rejected in recruiting more than anybody probably. And that's okay, but it was very fulfilling when you got somebody that maybe they missed on. Like, I never went to the U.S. Junior Boys. It was a meat market there, Mike. You know that.
Yep.
100 coaches and there's like 7 kids left, and they're all. So I sent my assistant. It was a camouflage. Rob Wakeling would go, Mills would go, and you know where I was? I was someplace else. Or as soon as they got, I went someplace else, and I saw people that nobody saw, and I got to see them with my eyes. And that's the Mackenzie Hughes. That's the Corey Connors. That's the Taylor Pendrith. My goodness, you guys missed out.
Well, the
So
thing that really strikes me on this, the kind of outline you just gave us is that you have to have creativity and adaptation. If you can't adapt to your surroundings in the recruiting world, you're going to die eventually. You've got to be able to adapt. And you've changed all through the years. You were like a chameleon. You changed so many times about how you would recruit.
correct. And I look back on it, and and the other thing, I never worried when I lost a recruit. I reviewed why I lost the recruit, and some of the ones I lost went someplace and they never turned out very good. And I thought, well, maybe that was good that I didn't get them. But I think had they come into our program, we would have done a better job with them. And the fit is so important. And I always thought at the end, if they don't want to come to Kent State as much as I want them to come to Kent State, then it's okay. They got to have a desire and a passion to come here and understand what we're going to do. So I think my last 10 years, I got much more comfortable in getting rejected, if that could be the word, because rejected.
We've all heard no a bunch, but one guy you didn't hear no from was Ben Curtis. And Ben went on to win an Open championship, and he's played pro golf for a long, long time. Talk about a putting lesson you may or may not have given him the week before the Open.
Yeah, that got written up rather. And yes, I did. But it was not the week before. I'll tell you what happened the week before. It was about 3 or 4 weeks. He gets his tour card, and he's out there and he's struggling a little bit. And he was the number 1 ranked amateur in the world. He was a 3-time All-American. He played in the world. He won the world gold medal for USA. So it wasn't like he was an unknown. But he went out on the tour and was struggling. And he lived in Kent, Ohio. And he came back one day and said, Coach, can you come down and give me a little putting lesson and check my putting out? And I said, sure. And we spent about an hour. And I watched him for 5 or 10 minutes. I knew exactly what I was going to do, Mike. And most of it was, yeah, he had some mechanical problems, very easy to fix. I fixed them as simple as I could. And then all of a sudden, when you see that ball going in the hole, the confidence level came right up. And I did, Mike. I'm very proud of that. He wasn't releasing the putter. He was the greens were so quick on the tour. They just figured they got to start it on line, jabbing a little bit. Lines were all bad. It was a simple fix. And it was just remembering what he did and what we taught him at Kent State. Ben was a great putter when he came to me, and he's a great putter, but you get in little mixes. So he came back, and we went over it again. And then he went to the Western Open in Chicago, and I think that's how he got in. He played with VJ, and VJ said, "You're good, kid." And he comes back, and he's sitting in my office a week before he goes. And I said to him, "Ben, do we want to go down and work with the putter for a little bit?" And I'll never forget what he told me. Just sitting in the casually talking about him, going, "Coach, I'm putting really good right now." Now, when has anybody in your college teams and anybody pro tour say they're putting really good right now? Doesn't happen. He was full of confidence, and he walked out of my office and he said, "Hey, Coach, I haven't told too many people this. I'm going to get you on the bag at Augusta." I had a standing bet with my team, mostly in college, that if you got to the Masters top 4, I want to be in the bag. And they all agreed. That was my little joke with them. Eric Frechette got beat by Tiger in the quarters. I had guys get really, really close. So Ben says, "I'm going to get you on the bag." He came back from the Open. He figured top 10 would get me on the bag. He'd get in Augusta. He wins, and I got to caddy for him at Augusta. So that was it was just a simple little thing, getting them in the right spot and getting their confidence back, Mike. We do it all the time and don't get the credit. This time
Yeah.
I get way too much credit for doing it.
Well, you may get way too much credit, but the point is you just kind of pointed him back to who he was,
That's
and so many times that's what you have to do with a player is get them to understand that they are themselves. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. But you talk about, you mentioned briefly Taylor, Mackenzie, Corey. So Taylor Pendrith, Mackenzie Hughes, and Corey Connors, who are all playing professional golf and all doing very well in their career, they were all on the team at one point at Kent State at the same time. And you said something earlier to me about you probably should have been fired if you didn't win the national championship with those guys. Talk about those three. What did you see in them in recruiting?
um, again, up north, Corey Connors, just a quick story. When I saw him, if you see his swing today, it is not a classic orthodox golf swing. I found out early on that when he was a kid at Listowel Golf Club, somebody came in and did a little clinic, and back then this guy was a Jimmy Ballard
Oh, wow.
instructor. And if you watch Corey to this day, Mike, you see his arms break down. I'm doing it. I'm standing up doing it, and it's unbelievable. It's Jimmy Ballard. I give myself a little pat on the back that I didn't change him. We tinkered a little bit. We made subtle little changes, and I didn't change him. And to this day, I go watch him play a lot. This summer I got to see him. I went to the Open. I went to Canadian. These guys have adopted me that I'm retired, and I watch them play all the time. President's Cup. He swings the same way, and his teaching is with the Canadian national coach. It's just a track man. He just sees his lines and angles. And if anybody ever changed, which I told him, Corey, do not listen to anybody. You are a champion. So that's a story on Corey Connors. People looked at that swing and said, we're not going to recruit that guy. I hung in there with him. He was a hockey player. He was just a competitive guy. Mackenzie Hughes, same thing. Nobody, I don't want to say nobody recruited him. I don't think he was very lightly recruited. Taylor Pendrith was the find of all finds. I mean, he didn't have a record, but he had ball speed of 185.
Mm-hmm.
And tell you what, I take great pride in my assistant coach, Rob Wakeley at the time, developing him into an All-American, but he just had speed. So yes, those three guys were on my team. The best story is in 2012 at Riviera. We had to win a playoff on the morning of the match play. It got dark. We had to win a playoff to get the 8th spot, and then 2 hours later play that Alabama team. And we stood on the 18th tee at Riviera at 8:00 in the morning with Florida State, and on that tee was Connors, Pendrith, and Mackenzie Hughes from Kent State. And on the tee from Florida was a guy called Brooks Koepka, Daniel Berger, and I'm drawing another blank. Three out of the
Drew
three.
Kittleson. Drew Kittleson.
Drew, I mean, guys that have gone on the tour, and there we were. We're the big underdog. Well, we got lucky. We won the playoff. By the way, with a birdie from Kyle Kamik, who's now selling real estate. So it's a team game. And then an hour later, we went out and we almost upset Alabama in the first round of match play, and that was Justin Thomas. So yeah, that was a great team. Nobody knew it. I didn't know it. Are these guys destined to make multi-millions on the tour? But you know what they were? They were hardworking. They were very organized, and they had some confidence. They believed in their preparation, and they believed in themselves. And I think that goes a long way when you want to get to the next level. So anyway, I could go on and on about that story. That playoff was unbelievable. So fun times.
Very good. Not very many coaches get to have a team that has three future tour players. Usually it is those larger, traditionally powerful schools. So for you to put that together in 2012, pretty amazing. A couple other players I want to talk about that played for you, and then both actually coached for you, and one of them coached for me, and that's Donnie Darr. I got to ask a question. He was an Ohio State kid from the moment he was born until the day he went to Kent, Ohio. How did you get him to Kent, Ohio? Easily one of the most. He's got some of the best. Hang on, combination of personality, intelligence, work ethic, competitiveness, humor. I mean, Donnie's got it all. How'd you get him to Kent from? He was going to be a Buckeye.
Mike, I'm glad you think the same of I think, or you think the same way I do. Donnie Darr is just one of the nicest young men in the world. And I was blessed to have him as a player. Then he worked for me. Then he coached for me. So I had 11 years of him, and it was a great 11 years. He is just awesome. But the bottom line, if you look back at the years, early 90s, I got to be careful how I say this because I don't want to say the wrong thing. Ohio State didn't want him. They didn't recruit him. And back then, I made a living on these rejected Buckeyes. And the coach at Ohio State was Jim Brown, who recruited me and coached me and was a mentor. So I had to be careful. So yeah, Donnie Darr was, he just was overlooked. And I got some overlooked Buckeyes, and we ran the table when I got some scholarship money, and it wasn't recruiting against Ohio State anymore. It was trying to beat out you at Oklahoma State for somebody, which I always lost. Never won that battle. But yeah, Donnie came, and I kid people. So the same way I got Ben Curtis. I offered them a shoebox full of money and bought their parents' cars. Just kidding. Now you can do that now. That's legal now. So maybe we'll talk about that later. But Donnie came, and what a great player he was. We ran the table with some Ohio boys, and Donnie was just awesome. And then, he went and he coached for me for many, many years. And then we got him into a different level. I'll never forget when I got the call from Coach Holder. Herbie, I can't imitate him like you can, but what's that Donnie Darr doing coaching at Akron? We need him to come to Oklahoma State. So he hired him away from Akron to be the assistant for Mike, and the rest is history. Now, when it came down to getting the dream job at Ohio State, I had to be careful. My word was, I wasn't liked in Columbus. I was the enemy. I wasn't the Michigan, but whatever. And I know Coach Holder and I both really highly recommended Donnie, and he got his dream job. And sometimes you get the dream job and it isn't what you think it is. And but the other thing during Donnie's career with me, he had the triplets, and Tina. The best thing ever happened to Donnie Darr was Tina, his wife. Trust
100%.
me. And so Donnie's one of those guys that just is going to be successful all the time, and he's going to make the young men around him better. That's what Donnie Darr does. And so, long story about Donnie. I'm just a big fan, and he's just a great young man. So,
well, I remember his wife Tina was crying when he drove her into Stillwater, And then 3 years later, when he got the job at Ohio State, she was crying leaving Stillwater. So she really did enjoy her time there. And Donnie thrived there. And he's back there now and does a great job for Alan Bratton. Truly one of the most underrated, not talked about coaches in all of college golf, Donnie Dar. He's
Absolutely.
amazing. Yeah, for sure. Okay. You're the guy you handed the program over to, you handpicked John Mills to be your successor at Kent State. And for one, I want to mention this. It's not easy taking over for a guy who coached 41 years. I took over from Mike Holder, who had coached 32 years at Oklahoma State, and I remember it. But I remember a promise he made to me. He said, Mike, when Laban Harris gave me the job here at Oklahoma State, he promised me he would not be around micromanaging or having any influence over my players, and I'm going to do the same for you. I assume you did something similar for John. So talk about that transition, and then what makes John a great coach?
Mike, I'm glad you said that because in the years leading up, I was thinking about, okay, this is the man that I'd like to replace me. He was a good recruiter. He's a hard worker. He understood the Kent State system. Does that make sense?
Yes.
He understood. John Mills was a first-team All-American. The only one I've ever had, by the way. Ben Curtis was not a first-team All-American. John Mills, his senior year, rolled the table, played on the tour for 2 years. So he had that playing record, which I think goes over fairly well. But I'll tell you the most important thing during those 2 or 3 years before I retired, when something came up difficult, I'd turn to him and I'd say, and maybe you're doing this, McKill, you sure you want to be a head coach, Millsy? You sure you want to do this? And he'd look at me and he'd never vary. Yes, I do. And then the last couple of years, we'd sit in the office and I'd say, hey, Millsy, make the decision. Who's in the lineup this week? And he would just go through it. And I would look at him and I go, that's who's in the lineup. He goes, really? And I said, yeah, that's who's in the lineup. You just picked the. So he did these things and then in identifying talent. And he does things differently. But the biggest thing, my pick for John Mills, is just the person that he is, the way he treats people, the way he treats his players and everybody around him, the way he works in the athletic direction. He is a great young man who gains the respect of everyone around him. And when the day ends, sometimes I know it's about W's and L's and wins and losses. Those will come, and they have come. He's out there.
Mm-hmm.
He's out there. He's won a couple conferences. COVID interrupted him. He's a fabulous, fabulous young man, a fabulous person. And when I left, Mike, I will tell you this. The team plays my golf course. I see the team at my golf course. I have never been to any of his practices. And I said the same thing that, maybe was said when Mike Holder left, that I'm not going to micromanage. When you want to call me and talk to me, doors open. And we've had some good talks. Struggle a little bit and then won and then struggle a little bit. But I'm just a big John Mills fan, always will be. And I think you're going to see good things from the Flashes coming forward.
Yeah, I love you saying that. That is really good. I know that it was important to me that Mike Holder kept that promise, that he wasn't around and he wasn't. And so I know John's been able to put his own stamp on the program, and they've already won a couple of conference championships. So we all look forward to seeing what he can do in the future. So you are a longtime member of the PGA, the Professional Golfers Association. My dad was a member for 40 years, and I know all about the Club Pro life. I grew up in it. You've owned a golf course, a couple of golf courses now, and so you've been a club professional all along. In 2008, you were awarded something that I think is one of the great, great honors in all of college golf. In fact, if I read on your website, Kent's website, one of the highest honors of my career is what you called it when you were given the Laban Harris Award in 2008. And before you speak to that, the listeners need to know it is an award given to a club professional who's also a college golf coach. So you're both. And I've got news for you. I have no idea how you had the career you had while being a golf professional at the same time. but I understand why you consider it one of your great honors. Talk about how much the Labor and Harris Award meant to you.
Mike, the names of the people who won that were sort of mentors, and I looked up to them. And the same thing with some of the Hall of Fames. It's first of all, the players, my players won this award for me. That's what they did. It's always the players. But when you join, Devin Browse, Jay Hardwick, I think Rod Myers was it.
Yes.
I mean, this is a group of guys. When I was a kid, I played against them. I remember Rod Myers as a coach, and then to join them, and then you learn about Labor Harris. You read up about the history. He was the founder of Oklahoma State Golf and worked at, I guess it was Stillwater Country Club.
Well, it was
And
Lakeside Golf Course.
Yeah.
Now he helped develop Stillwater Country Club after he retired.
So the point is to be mentioned in the same breath as these great leaders of college golf programs and do what they did. It's one of the best on to be recognized for that. I don't know what to say. It's still it hangs in my office and it's there and it's just it gives me chills. I get chills now thinking when I got that, how I got that awarded, and the people who were there to share it with me. Very, very special. It's
Yeah.
and hard. Again, I'm not bragging, but hard to do today. I don't think what I do today would. It's just harder and harder because the coaches are getting paid way too much money, and that's okay. You deserve it. And so back then, you had two jobs. I had two jobs when I took this. In '78, when I was named the coach, they paid me $1,500 to coach Kent State's golf team. So, it was great for them, and now for someone to win this now, they got to be very, very special. And it's a tremendous honor, mostly with that name Labor Harris on it and knowing what he did. Truly honored.
Yeah, and I think what Laban did was he promoted the game of golf. But he was not just a college golf coach, competing at the highest level. He actually promoted the game, gave golf lessons to the little ladies, and ran tournaments and ran a course. So
Been
pretty
there,
amazing.
been there, done that. And when I won that in '08, maybe I wasn't teaching as much on the local level, but yeah, I ran my golf course. And, Mike, just a throw in, it was really nice for my ego. I had opportunities. In the mid '90s, we started rolling, maybe late '90s. I was still young enough. So I had opportunity. I was approached about leaving Kent State. And the people that did that didn't do their homework. I lived in Kent, Ohio. My wife was a professor, and I did own a golf course. And it didn't matter about the money or this ability. And I truly believed I could win a national championship at Kent State University. And if the only thing that drove me every single day that I woke up to was to win a national championship, how would it be easier? Yeah, probably then one of those quote unquote sunshine jobs would have been more appropriate. But every day we did the same things at Kent State to try and put my players in a position to be champions. And we never got there, but I don't consider it a failure that we were close so many damn times. But
Yeah.
anyways.
No, I mean, I wouldn't have you on this podcast if I thought you were a failure. I mean, you've been a heck of a success, and to have done it the way you did it all those years was great. But part of that was also building facilities. So let's talk about how the Ferrara Page Golf Training Center came about. I know you had a lead gift from that family, but I mean, it's kind of necessary anymore to have facilities to be able to compete, but also to, being a Midwestern school, you did have some challenging weather conditions, Midwestern school. Talk
Thank you.
about, you bet. Talk about that facility, how it came about.
Well, we were hitting balls in the indoor football stadium. They went 55 yards. We putted on the turf. I thought it was great. Seriously, we didn't make excuses then, but I always wanted maybe a couple garage stalls to hit balls out on the back of our university course. So I got with an architect who played golf for Kent State in the '60s and draw this up. And all of a sudden he drew up this building. And then lo and behold, I was at Fred Warren's place at ETSU at East Tennessee State, and he had one of the first. I saw that and I said, wow, you know. And then in 2003, this some guy called Ben Curtis won the Open. And all of a sudden in '04 and '05, it got really easy to ask for money. Um, because we were then competing at we competed with Ben and we were compete. So this is what we need. And, you know, we raised well over 2 million. Are there bigger ones? Absolutely. But we can do everything in that facility. It's mind boggling. 7,000 square feet inside and donors at 100,000 a clip. We didn't have a guy we could call up. Dr. Ferrara, the Ferrara family, is my business partner and a mentor to me. He's my partner at my golf course.
Mm.
So how about that? And he just believed in these young men. And yes, he did make the lead gift, but you know, Kent State doesn't have a law school, a medical school. So this was small gifts, and everybody came together, and we just built a fabulous place. And that took us again into the next recruiting level. But when we brought young men then in '06, I guess, and we showed them around, that their eyes went up. We might have been just maybe there was 10 or 11 at that time. Really was easy to recruit to. Now what it is, no, there are literally no excuses. We can walk out of that place in February and win, and we finally did one year. Went down to TPC Myrtle Beach at the end of February, and we won in February. Could never do that. I mean, we would go down south early on and get our butts handed to us. And I remember Larry Penley and Buddy looking up at the scoreboard in Puerto Rico, and we're behind by 40 or 50, and Hack would look and you know, we shot like 302, 306, you know, we just come out of this. And I never said anything. And I used to say to those guys, I'll get you in May. And that was one of my and I did get them in May sometimes, but that facility has been a huge part to keep our program. And Mike, I love you, buddy. That Midwestern program in the mix.
Very good. Absolutely. You know what's the healthiest thing about this conversation we've had today is this. You've made no excuses. And you didn't make excuses with your big players because you had them believing we're just playing college golf here. Let's go get this done. You didn't set it up like, oh, well, if we don't win, it's because we are challenged with weather. If we don't win, it's because we're a smaller school. No, why make those excuses? Figure out how to become a champion. And part of that is showing the commitment to a facility that will help you train better. And that's what you did. And that's what young coaches need to understand. If you don't have a facility, don't use it as an excuse. Get to work on getting one, right?
Absolutely. And make your players believe and put them in a position, Mike, where they can be champions. And that's all I ever did was prepare them and put them in a position. And we got there a few times, and that's all you can, you know, the elite, that elite, it's hard. Mike, I don't have to tell you, you've won it 3 or 4 times, but it's so difficult, but it's fun. And if those players believe that, that's they're successful.
Yeah, they're wonderful. That's great, great, great sentiment right there. Okay. Best piece of advice you've ever gotten from another coach. What would that be?
You know, I knew this was coming, and the best piece of advice that I got from a coach was from Coach James, my football coach. Even when he's at Washington, he used to come out and watch me play when he retired. He was down in Palm Springs. I had this relationship with him. It was very special. But back in the day when I was sitting there, he used to say something, and I didn't know at the time, but he said, I want Saturday players. You all played football back then, Saturday at 1 o'clock. I want Saturday players at 1 o'clock when the flag goes up. I don't want Wednesday players.
Mm.
And he talked about preparation. So the best piece of advice was, and we talked about it later, so it was an ongoing one, not one little nugget of do this or do that or do this. It was just this preparation. Don James, his advice was, Coach, you can prepare them, that's your job, and put them in a position to be champions. I'll never forget that. And if you listen to Coach Saban, it's unbelievable. I guess we did sit in the same room for 2.5 years and listen to one of the greatest football coaches of all time. But anyways, and one other thing he told me, when I was very young. I asked him about his recruiting class at Kent State. I was in graduate school. And I know this has been repeated. Maybe he got it for somebody else. And he said, and he called me Herbie. Herbie, um, yeah, we better think our recruits are great because we got them. And we think they're all great. You want to know how good is this recruiting class? And you know the standard. It's been repeated and repeated. Ask me in 4 years. And hence it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And what I believe in is developing young men on the course, off the course, and putting them into life to be successful, leading to not a fan of the transfer portal, not a fan of NIL. We've taken some things away from what we did and what we could do as golf coaches. We can still do it, but so that's a great piece of advice. A golf coach, I'm going to throw. So it's two. Dwayne Knight at UNLV. Just he was so sharing, and all the coaches when I was younger, they were so sharing with me, but had trouble with qualifiers. Everybody, how do you qualify? How do you qualify? Dwayne Knight, we call it the UNLV qualifier, still do. You put them all in every week, and the winner goes, and then he picks. I said, "You're crazy," and then he explained it to me. They all go in, they all play. That means your ninth man in the team. Every week he's got a chance to play, and it's the greatest thing to say. You play good this week, I'm taking you, and I believe in you. And he did tell me, though, he said, when you got a number one player who hates to lose, even to his teammates, it really works, coach. He had a guy called Ryan Moore on his team then. And Ryan didn't want to lose to his teammates. I used to throw John Hahn into qualifiers, and they understood. And I used to go to John Hahn, say, don't make my job difficult. You better go win. You better go win this 54-hole deal this weekend. And that was Dwayne Knight's. It was a gem for me. And I still did other types of qualifying, but that was a go-to for Herb Page.
I love it. I did that with Ricky Fowler. I told him, Ricky, you're a freshman. I'm going to make you qualify for this first tournament. Don't make me look like an idiot. And the truth is, that's the dumbest thing I've ever said, because if I went to that first tournament without Ricky, what a dumb guy. But he won the qualifying. And that's the thing about an elite player is they do have pride, and they're going to want to beat their teammates too. So they're going to figure out a way to win that qualifier.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. You mentioned it. You briefly touched on it. So, and it's the last thing I'm going to ask you today is about the transfer portal. I think we'd be lying to ourselves if we didn't say, if there was a gap between Kent State and, say, Oklahoma State in golf, or in Kent State and Alabama in football, if there was a gap before, the transfer portal has probably widened that gap. What would you say?
Oh, in football and basketball, it's a joke. We're a farm system. The FCS is a farm system for the Power Five, and our football team, we changed coaches, and we had 7 all-conference players. They're no longer at Kent State, and they've gone to Georgia, Pitt. But you know what? Let's not make excuses, Mike. That's the system. You better learn how to work within it. Golf, I'm not too sure yet. It's not as big. Would that be fair to say, Mike? There's not as many players going in. And I guess it's okay if a young man is in a program and he can't get in the lineup to transfer someplace where he can. I've let players go to a Division III school and he became a Division III All-American. I'm friends with that guy to this day. I mean, it was great. And I've had couple players, not very many, leave my program, and I couldn't understand why, and went to another one and were moderately successful. So I don't know. I just think it's just that resilience you have when you go to a pro. You make a commitment. Obviously, when you chose that school, you chose that coach, and then all of a sudden, 2 years later, that school isn't good enough for you, and that coach isn't good enough for you, and you got stars in your eyes. So I like there's a loyalty and a lack of commitment, and I guess when you're at Kent State, there's a development. I didn't get very many Ricky Fowlers. I'm sorry. I did have a Ben Curtis, by the way. He won the first qualifier and played for 4 years, and it was stupid. Same thing. I got to get him in. But so I get disappointed when I see a player, and I still know some of the players, although I'm slowly getting out of it, and they better have a damn good reason to leave where they're at to something that is up here. Because when the day ends, Mike, how many of these young men are going to be playing the tour?
Not very many.
So, have some patience, determination, lack of commitment, loyalty. All those words enter. That's what I talk about. So I have a little difficulty with the transfer portal. But
Well,
then on the flip side, if there's a better opportunity for the student athlete, I guess they got to take it. So I'm
yeah,
sorry.
I'm kind of with you. We're both kind of old school. So I'm operating within the system as it stands right now. And I'm going to, and I hit the refresh button on the transfer portal every day, every week. But the truth is, it has changed our world a lot. And a player development coach like you, and you were that your entire career, there'll probably be less and less of those at your level. It's sad because they won't have time to develop a player. The kid will be on to the next biggest thing that he thinks is better. So, but anyway, it's the world we live in. So you don't live there anymore.
I'm sort of happy that, and I'll be honest. I think John Mills is just like Mike McGraw. He hits the refresh button. Listen, you're always looking for a better player and a good player.
Sure.
Hey, great players make great coaches. That's all
Absolutely.
They've been awesome for me.
Well, Herb, thank you so much for spending an hour with me today. This has been fantastic. You are everything I thought you would be on this podcast. I know my listeners are going to love hearing you. So thanks again, and best of luck going forward.
Mike, it's a pleasure, and I wish you the best all the time. And I do follow Baylor. There's a few programs I follow closer than others, and it's just a treat to be with you, Mike. I miss this part of coaching, but
college golf misses you. You should sure know that. So thanks again, and my very best to you going forward.
Thanks, Mike. Take care.